I am Dr. Mario Wallace, the instructor for the lesson on what's the purpose of strategic risk. In this series of videos, I will cover some important topics of mastering strategy management. Welcome to the lesson, What is the purpose of the strategic risk? The purpose of this lecture is to educate you on the steps of aligning strategic risk to a strategy map and its relations with the heat map. If a strategic plan is developed without considering the appetite for risk, it is just an operational plan to sustain a position in the market and not a strategic plan seeking competitive advantage. Leaders should not execute a strategic plan without understanding the strategic risk associated with it. They must examine the strategic plan and its associated risk and develop budgeted contingency plans before activating the strategic plan. Most strategic plans that failed did not have a strategic risk plan associated with it. This tool is a heat map. It's categorized by color, meaning the green field signifies low risk and the red signifies high risk. A heat map looks at two things: the likelihood of the risk occurring and the impact of the risk. Likelihood is the two across the bottom, and impact is located vertically to the left. The first step in the process of examining strategic risk in a strategic plan is to examine a strategy map. We look at the strategy map and we ask ourselves which strategic priorities have risk. Before I fully explain how to examine the risk, let me anchor you in the meaning of the three categories of risk in an organization. There are three categories of risk. There is known. This is a low risk or operational risk. For example, if the company is a fast food restaurant, the question of risk should be, is there a potential that the workers may steal food and supplies? Yes, there is a high risk of this occurring. Since we know this category of risk should be covered in HR policies. The second category of risk is the known unknown, meaning that you know that there is a possibility of the risk occurring, but it's unknown when it may occur. This is considered a strategic risk. For example, a president of a healthcare system sets up a contractual deal with a local politician to build out Wi-Fi infrastructure in a rural community. As the infrastructure is being built out, the president unknowingly votes against the interest of the local politician, and the relationship between the president and the local politician goes awry. They stopped speaking, and the Wi-Fi infrastructure project stalled. This can affect the strategic plan. Therefore, there should always be a contingency plan linked to potential risk and a strategic plan to mitigate the risk. The last category of risk is an unknown unknown. This is a risk caused by natural occurrences such as COVID and the Spanish flu. We can somewhat prepare for these, and sometimes we cannot. For strategic plans, the category of risk that must focus on are strategic risk. Basically, you fully examine a strategic plan, including the strategy map, and identify areas where there is a likelihood of risk. Here I am placing color gradient risk scores on the strategy map to give you an overview of how risk is aligned with the strategy map. Wherever you place a risk score on the strategy map, you must build out a contingency plan for each priority to mitigate the risk. The next step in this process is to take the identified strategic priorities, write them on a strategic priority ranking score sheet, and begin scoring them. On this sheet, I have identified 10 strategic objectives from top to bottom with the risk score to the right. I have already done the work on this sheet, and I organized the priorities from the highest risk to the lowest risk. As you can see at the top of the sheet, red is ranked 23, 22, 20, and 20. These are risk scores that I gave to the strategic objective based on the likelihood of the risk occurring. For example, I gave the objectives align HR planning with the institutional strategy a high score because bureaucratic organizations are challenging to change their behavior to attempt something new. So if you look at this sheet, to the left is the risk ID number and to the right is the risk score. Impact is located vertically on the table, and likelihood is located horizontally at the bottom of the table. Impact goes from low to high. The likelihood goes from very low to very high. We must do the map, and I have a few filled in. So 1 times 1 equals sign 1, 1 times 2 equals sign 2, and we fill in the rest. We do this to create the heat map scores. Although this is a 5 by 5 matrix, you can choose any size matrices for yours. The next step is to categorize the colors of the heat map. The green colored fields are low risk, yellow is a moderate risk, and red is a high risk. The number one ranked risk score is 23, and it goes here on the heat map in the red section, and the rest is populated. We must place the risk scores in the location where the risk is. To complete this process, we must integrate strategic risk into the strategy map. In the financial perspective, there are two objectives that have risk scores. In the customer perspective, there are two objectives that have risk scores. 3 in the internal process and 3 in talent and technology. Fully examine a strategic plan, including the strategy map, and identify areas where there is a likelihood of risk. Here, I am placing color gradient risk scores on the strategy map to give you an overview of how risk is aligned with the strategy map. Integrating risk into an organization's strategy map aligns everyone in the organization to the risk and makes risk mitigation everyone's job. This concludes my lecture about the strategic risk. Stay with me to achieve the goal of this strategy management series, that is to help organizations develop and implement their strategic priorities to achieve success. To learn more, visit my website, allthingsstrategic.org, or email me at info@allthingsstrategic.org.